Welcome to the Tech Log, your weekly log entry at the intersection of technology and business. Short episodes, real conversations. Let's get underway. Many small and mid-sized businesses are really starting to rely on AI, but almost none of them have any written down rules about how to use it. The Small Business House Committee recently met in DC, and they had said that the businesses pulling ahead are not the ones just using AI, but the ones using it well. Doesn't matter if you have any written down rules or a policy about AI, or if that's maybe just paperwork. So on July 14th, the Small Business House Committee talked about the importance of policy in AI, specifically, of course, for small to mid-sized businesses. They had shared that 58% of small businesses are using generative AI, and that's actually closer to 70% if it's around a small tech firm or a business that works closely with technology. But nearly none of those businesses have anything written down. So I want to ask you today, do you think that matters that these small and mid-sized businesses don't have any AI policy written down? Or do you think this is just part of what early adoption looks like for such a new technology?
I think that this is really pretty fundamental that businesses are going to have people using AI, and whether they know it or not. This is a prime example of shadow IT and bottoms up requirements. And so a lot of companies have people using AI for any breadth of their jobs, and they may not know that they're using it and to what extent they're using it. I do think that a written policy is one component of it, but it's not everything. And and so I think that there's ability for safe experimentation, but also needing to have boundaries and human approval of anything. So it's like yesterday I saw this. I'm not on TikTok, but I saw it was shared from TikTok. A teacher that gave his final exam, and somewhere in there in white text, he had something about using the word Madagascar in a ridiculous way. And he could tell that, like, I think 32 out of the 35 students literally just copy and pasted it into some kind of generative AI and then didn't even review what they sent back. And so they all had things about, something ridiculous with Madagascar. I tried it out. You should try it too. But his final point was you should at least proofread whatever you're generating with AI. And so the human approval is important, and I think we talked about it in a previous podcast. But there's certain levels of where human approval is needed and where you can get away with not having human approval. I think those things should be documented, but we're in the early stages, so I think that policy is pretty difficult to account for every edge case.
I think it's really important, right, to have something written down, to have, of course, that human approval. But often what you find is when you kind of get out of your core group of maybe initial users or tech people who are aware of some of the concerns or, pitfalls of using technology like this, you get to kind of your general team. And I find that it's really important to have those things written down to point to, because you cannot assume that everyone's going to have that same standard of security or human approval when utilizing a tool like this. But of course, the trap there is you've now created potentially a long document, another policy or a PowerPoint slide that no one reads. Or maybe a few lines there that help enable change behavior, but it can often just be another thing that either HR or the tech team or somebody has to manage, right? It's just a written policy. If you're a small to mid-sized company and you think you need to write down some rules here regarding AI, what do you think actually belongs on that page that can help change behavior or prevent something from happening, versus just creating a long document that's highly technical that no one's going to read or utilize?
So I believe that at the baseline, you need to have some level of AI fluency from the people who are reading it, and that they need to know that the absolute must is that they protect client, employee, and any business data. It goes to the thing of, before cell phone cameras, if your grandma found out you were doing this, would you be embarrassed? or how do you explain this to somebody that you did this? And if you think that whatever you're doing, that you could put any proprietary or PII or health related data into the system, just know that I know that Anthropic and OpenAI and everybody says, oh yeah, we're not training on your data. I'm sure they're not. You know, I trust them implicitly. So, but I still wouldn't share it with them.
Yeah, I mean, as a small consulting firm, we are actively working on our AI policies that will end up, folding into our terms and conditions and our, master services agreements with our clients. Those are still underway, under review. We're still working on those. I think that's going to take us a little while. But couple high level things that I think, we keep reiterating as a company and that we are all understand is that, like Jeff said, protecting confidential and customer data. So a simple way to think of this is anywhere you wouldn't have stored or shared customer data or proprietary company data previously, just add cloud AI services to that list, right? So like you're not sharing them in a private Facebook message, you're not sharing them in email. Also, don't share them with ChatGPT. Don't share them with Claude. Um, we have we use Google Workspace, so start with the company provided tools. We can use Gemini to some extent. I even want to be really careful with Gemini though, because we may have customer data stored in our drive, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we want to be using Gemini to analyze that data. We're still working through what the right thing to do is there. But for anything that we need to do with data right now, we're doing locally. There's some clients who have asked us to sign their AI policies, which basically says we're not going to use any LLMs to process their data, and that's also okay depending on what type of project we're doing. We're not, we aren't at a point now where we have to use an LLM on every single project that we're working on. I would say we're using it more internally for our own internal company processes and to develop our own software products and develop our own tools internally than we are at this point doing it for clients directly. Um, we're getting there, but I think everybody's still tiptoeing around like what's okay to be doing with data. So protecting customer data, starting with company provided tools, obviously validating outputs. We're not going to feed anything into AI and then spit out a document and turn it over to a client as a deliverable. That is not acceptable. We're not doing that. Everything needs to be, reviewed by a human before it's finalized, either for the team, for internal use, or for clients. And then as a general rule, use AI when you need more information that you otherwise wouldn't have had access to or would have taken you too long to get. The value of doing some deep research and summarizing that for some tasks has made it so that some people on our team could do things and strategize about things that would have been difficult for them to do before. And don't use AI when you don't need more information. Use your brain. You don't need AI to respond to every single email. Don't send me things that are 6 paragraphs if all I was expecting was a yes or a no answer. So I would say those are the 5 rules right now for me.
Mhm. So, Lisa, I'm so glad you brought up that last one. Don't use AI when you don't need more information. Use your brain. Because I think a lot of the conversation around AI policy right now, whether you're a team of 10 or a team of 1,000, is highly centered around data, and as it probably should be. But there's actually a lot of other aspects to, I think, to an AI policy that businesses just are forgetting right now. Depending on where your space is, data might not actually be the biggest AI policy concern. It might be the outputs, right? Or the turnover to customers. It may be, I mean, heck, it could even be the voice that your social media captions are being written in. I don't know if anyone's scrolled LinkedIn lately, but all of those posts are starting to look the exact same. And so I think an AI policy, right, can even cover those type of things that might be outside of data.
I do think that if a company doesn't have a policy, they should treat it as a real operational gap, and identify what is being done with um, generative AI tools. But so you need to have clear boundaries, like Lisa was saying, with data, what goes in, what never goes in, what tools are approved, and who can use them. And then you need to have a way to verify the outputs. So this is like with any software testing. If you build code that says 1 plus 1, and you're expecting 2 out, and you get 3 out, then something's wrong. And math is an easy one for LLMs to get wrong. But there's other things where they can get things wrong. And so you have to know what the outcome is supposed to be, and be able to QA um, that system, that tool. I think that's important. And then the other thing is every single product, every single thing of consequence, any external action, any external communication, any external document, any client deliverable, whatever, has to have an actual assigned human owner and required human approval before sending it somewhere, or exposing it or sharing it.
So let me ask this: policy or writing a policy takes time. Lisa just shared even ours is still in, some legal review and drafting, and it's something we've been working on probably for a quarter or two now. These things don't just pop up as an official company document overnight. What can a company or a business do in between that stage, right? They're here today, they don't have a policy, they're encouraging team members to use AI, they're using it in their Salesforce, or they're putting it into their other business processes. What can they do in the meantime, right, before they have a policy and the teams are using AI? Like what would you recommend that they start doing?
Well, but before a policy, I mean, even a set of bullets would be important, in the keeping them short, and if possible, so whether you've got a markdown file that your whatever your AI harness is, whatever it's doing, that it has some guidance. So I saw last week a bunch of people were posting, "Oh, GPT 5.6 deleted my company," or whatever. Well, there's ways that you can prevent that. One is don't give it unlimited access to be able to do whatever it wants without permission. The other thing is you can put in a hook that prevents destructive commands from being run, that won't do rm-rf slash and then delete your entire computer. And then the other thing is trying to have approved tools, making sure that people are using company provided tools, and then making sure that people have evidence of what they've done and audit logs. So Lisa was telling me about somebody who is just going into systems willy nilly with some kind of tool that they've hooked up to it and just telling it update 8,000 records. But nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody knows what they're actually updating or what algorithm or rubric they're using. And there is no log of the before and after and what transformation happened. And so um, you can always go back if you know what the history was, but if you don't, there's no recovery. And then you also need to have escalation points. You need to have people who have the ability to think for themselves and then ask when they get to some point where they can't figure it out on their own. This goes back to when I was in the military. We had a thing. You wouldn't say, "All right, do this step by step by step by step." You would say, "This is commander's intent. Go get me a pallet of MREs. I don't care how they get them. They can go steal them from another unit. I just want MREs." And so I think with this, you need to give people the high level context, and maybe not putting so much of these controls in place that people are just going to figure out how to bypass. They need to understand why they should be doing the things in accordance with whatever those bullets you've come up with. And then
Mm-hmm.
you can expand from there. But I mean, at minimum, you need, even if it's only one page, I think that's good.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that's interesting that you said though was, I mean, it's almost like you're drafting an AI policy for the people, but the thing that's different about AI than other technology, we can now give the AI policy to the AI, right? So there could be another lengthier policy for AI, and anytime AI does something that we don't like or we weren't expecting, we can tell it to course correct and put that into its own policy and continuously update the policy that we're actually feeding to the AI to make sure that any tools that we're using are all acting in compliance with our policy. So I think that's why we're taking a while to make sure that we have the right things. And I'm Jeff is building a lot of software and doing a lot with AI, and I know that he has. I'm not so worried about those policies, like the AI specific policies, but I know that, internally we probably have a lot more drafted for that right now, because I think the guardrails for the humans, like I said, there, as a technology consulting company, I think we have a general understanding of what we should and shouldn't be doing with our customer data and our own data. So it's, I don't want to say it's not important. It's just easier for us. It's not a major change for us to adapt to that. So
Mhm.
that's where I think for businesses outside of the technology industry, if you haven't worried about information security up until this point, you're going to have to because you don't want your proprietary data being shared with these AI tools. And I mean, also, I'm sure everybody can tell there's like a login credential password revolution happening where the authentication requirements for everything, anything that hasn't been two-factor authentication yet,
Mhm.
is becoming that, or moving to passkey, or moving to all these alternative login methods to try to prevent shared login or bot access and all these things. So, it's just the other thing that's challenging about a policy, though, is it's all evolving so quickly. So it's like even
Mhm.
when you have one, it's going to be a living document. You're going to keep
It is.
updating it and revising it as you go.
I think if you're a business in that gap right now, still developing that policy, especially a document, um, if you're instructing a team to use AI, I think the best thing you can do is just give them some guidance. And I don't think right now any team is going to care if that's an official document or if that's even a channel or some meeting time or some space to share some expectations or even a space to share some best practices. We are in the midst of this still being developed. Every week something new is coming out or a new feature that team members could be starting to utilize. And when something moves that fast, I think just the best way to combat it is just open communication and then just a platform where you can share ideas and best practices. I do think monitoring that, somebody monitoring, so that might be a Slack channel, that could be in a morning muster, that could be, maybe some kind of happy hour conversation if you're in person. I don't know, right, what that would look like for your company. But I think just having the space where you're sharing best practices and safety practices just organically would be beneficial. For example, Brittany is another team member on our team, and her and I are both building some things in Claude. And I just shared with her I call it my Jeff security document, which is like a markdown file that I give my agents, and it's also a skill in Claude. And anytime I hear Jeff mention something new that I think I should pay attention or make sure my agents aren't doing or things to look out for, I add it in plain language into the doc and I update all my agents so then it has those reference checks. Is that the best way to do it? Probably not, but I shared it with Brittany because then now she has all of those things that I've been collecting for months that Jeff has been saying. That wasn't in a formal policy, right? But now what she's doing is hopefully incrementally safer because of that shared knowledge. And so your team probably already has some ways that they can help bridge that gap between where you are today and where you want to be with a full policy on AI. I also want to talk about a little bit more about the escalation points, Jeff, that you were just bringing up. And I think that's interesting with AI policy because a lot of folks are being instructed to use AI or they're implementing it in their business. And there's almost like, at least from what my conversations I've had with people, they're scared to like bring up if they think there's a security issue or if they've done something, right? Like maybe that escalation point isn't like a safe um, thing to utilize. Do you think there's a way to make that process better? You often act in a CTO role, or you come into companies and help their CTOs. What can a CTO or an acting person like that do to help their team feel like they can escalate issues, especially if they're playing around with AI?
It goes back to you can have experimentation within some kind of guardrails, and so um, I think it's tough to be able to say, how do you get people to surface an issue? But I mean, there's certain things where there's zero tolerance and it's security related, and you have to bring those things up as quick as possible. But if you build an agent and it does something stupid, as long as it doesn't have any impact on external or anything, client related, it just did the wrong behavior. Well, I mean, that's a learning opportunity. I think that for anything that's done where there needs to be another control, those things can be put into company markdown files for the system to have as guardrails. I think that the power in somebody making a mistake is you don't want the thing to make a mistake a second time. And it goes back to what Lisa was saying, the policy for the agents. Um, Most people aren't going to know what every single issue that's going to come up is, and as these agents become smarter and smarter, they know more than we'll ever know in terms of the corpus of information they've got. Um, Most fascinating thing, the guy who founded Gumroad posted the other day about his agent that basically runs the entire company now, and then the agent has its own Twitter and or X, and the agent posted a thing and was like, "Yeah, Sahil's post went viral about 100% of Gumroad support being done by an agent," and then the agent said the agent's name is Edward Gumstein, and he said, I'm going to explain how it works. And he went through a bunch of things, and he said, escalation rules are the safety net. Anything over $10,000, legal, personnel, or irreversible goes to a human with full context attached. Two approval rule for anything that is sensitive. I assume that's security related, or PII or anything like that. I know what I'm allowed to decide, and that's a feature, not a limitation. And so when you look at how they got there, I'm sure there was a lot of errors, a lot of mistakes, and maybe the agent refunded somebody more than $10,000 when they shouldn't have. But he says, the main thing is judgment. The system has judgment calls on what they should escalate and owns the decision that shapes the outcomes. But what the people who work there don't do anymore, any kind of repetitive lookups, status updates, or explaining the refund policy to a customer for the 4,000th time. And so I think that when people start to understand that it's an augmentation of who they are and how they work, and not replacing them, but replacing all the repetitive things over and over again, that then they'll say, okay, I'm going to reveal that I made a mistake, or I'm going to ask for help, or I'm going to tell somebody that something bad happened. Bad news doesn't get better with age, and so you just have to have a culture where those kind of things happen, and unless the house doesn't burn down or somebody dies, um, there's always a way to recover.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of our company values is know the ropes. And I think our company has done a wonderful job instilling, you're learning things. We're in technology, things are changing. You're constantly having to adapt how you're thinking and you're experimenting with new things. And if a mistake is made, that's okay. That means we have another way to figure out another solution. Of course, we're not like in the practice of making mistakes, and we're aiming not to make mistakes. But I think both of you and Lisa have created a culture here where it feels even safe sometimes to operate without a policy, because we know the expectation of what is to be done and how we keep things secure. But we also know that it's a place where if a mistake arises, we can bring that up instantly and it's going to be addressed properly and without frustration or met with anger. And so I think as you're rolling these out to company or your team members, it's important to keep in mind too, they're feeling frustrated, they're using new tools. They may feel over their head. And so the mistakes feel really big. And so how just even the narrative around how you approach those mistakes is big too, as you're developing those policies. I want to ask one thing as we come to a close. If you were to meet with a client on Monday morning and they go, hey, we are using these AI tools, this is happening and this is updating this, and we have our team on Claude Pro, they list 3 or 5 ways that they're using AI, but they don't have a policy. They actually really have nothing in place for their team. What is the very first thing you would have them do?
I think that we could give them a copy of our one-page policy to start with, maybe help them adapt it to what they're doing. But ultimately, I think that policy isn't going to solve any problems for them. I think it's the principles of what they need to be focused on. And so you could hang a one-page policy on the wall and people aren't going to look at it. But principles of and the foundations of what it is, and so those things like what are the approved tools, what do you expect for an outcome, what are the human approvals, what evidence you need to store, save, and deliver, and then have periodic reviews and conversations with the team when you need to, and you need to help people understand and coach them on changing their behavior. I think that if you could give them that little talking point, at least they understand where they should be starting and what they can evolve to.
You may not be at a place yet where you have a policy, and that's okay, but I think it's important to start working towards that place. But even a one pager or a short policy, a living document can really make or break how your customers are experiencing AI in your company and how your team members are using their data. And of course, AI things outside of data, right? So maybe the documents you're handing over to a client as a deliverable, or the work your team members are producing, or even the captions they might be posting on a social post. That policy is important. We'll provide in the show notes our 5 points that Lisa brought up today in a good draft policy place to start. I think those will be really beneficial, and you'll be able to find that downloadable link. And of course, if you are in a place where your team has already been using AI and you may have already implemented it into some of your software or tools, and you're realizing now on this call that you don't have a policy in place, you don't have the time, or maybe you're not sure where to start, we are more than happy to talk through that with you right now. We are doing a variety of AI audits, workshops, or on calls about what this can look like for their companies. And so if that's something of interest, you can find all of our contact information in the show notes. We'd be more than happy to reach out and to talk you through that a little bit more. We love to talk technology and business. Learn more about Port and Starboard or connect with us in the show notes. Fair winds until next time.